welcome you all to our next episode of our webinar series, The Determining Decade. Titled as such because the next 10 years are really, truly critical in terms of conservation and positively changing the trajectory of our planet. My name is Lindsay Hauer. I work on the philanthropy team at the Nature Conservancy in California, and I'm based in the Bay Area. This week's webinar will focus on our kelp strategy, saving our forgotten forests. I'd like to introduce you all to my colleague, Norah Eddy. She's Associate Director of the Oceans Program here in California. She leads our kelp conservation initiative, which she'll explain what that is in a minute. But first, Norah, I'd love to hear how you got into conservation.
Sure, thanks, Lindsay. I grew up in a small fishing and farming community in New England, and I have always just loved the ocean. It's always been a big part of my life. And I actually came to TNC a little more than a year ago after spending the last 10 years of my life working across the fisheries sector in all different kinds of capacities. So I started working aboard commercial fishing vessels in Alaska, and then went down to Galapagos to develop innovative management plans for their lobster fishery. And then most recently, I was the founder of a sustainable seafood company based here in California. And so while I have this deep background in fisheries, I kind of first and foremost consider myself an entrepreneur and problem solver for the ocean. And so when I first learned about the problems with facing our kelp forests here in California and around the world, I was really excited to kind of take this challenge head on and lead this program because I'm passionate about advancing science-based conservation that leverages these bold and innovative approaches. And I think that's something that this team and this organization are just really well positioned to do. When I think about the Nature Conservancy, I think that over the 60-year term of this organization that it's really been built on the belief that we can build solutions that work for both people and nature. And that's something that's really important to me. And even more so that the people that are really positioned to solve big problems are the ones that are living them every day. Our fishermen, our landowners, our ranchers, our farmers, and our resource managers. And when I think about this next 10 years ahead of us, this determining decade for our planet, I fully understand that our oceans are out there on the front lines, absorbing all of this carbon that we're dumping into the atmosphere and warming at an increasing rate. And so when I think about the last 10 years of my life, I think that really what it's done is prepared me with all of the tools and the fortitude that I need to have the big impact that we need for our oceans today. And so I'm excited to share with everyone here today a little bit about what we've been up to with our kelp program.
Terrific. Thanks, Norah. Well, why don't you go ahead and get started? Thanks again.
Awesome. Okay. Can you imagine Northern California without trees? Imagine large swaths of the Sierra just gone in a matter of years. Well, that's exactly what's happened to our forgotten forest on the North Coast. Just below the surface of the Pacific, from the Oregon border all the way down to Baja, 2 species of canopy-forming kelp provide the backbone for healthy marine ecosystems that our state depends on. If you've ever driven along our coast or walked along the seashore, you've probably noticed these massive floating forests breaking the surface of the ocean or found pieces of them littering the beach. But what you may not know about these systems is that they actually rival their terrestrial counterparts in terms of biodiversity and productivity. And kelp forests are similar to other species like corals and mangroves that you may be familiar with, these foundational species they're called, in that they're both an organism and a habitat. So they provide this incredible 3-dimensional structure through the water column that supports an immense amount of biodiversity, including some of our most important fisheries. These forgotten forests temper ocean acidification. They provide home and nursery grounds to hundreds of different marine organisms, including some of our most iconic here in California, our abalone and our rockfish and our otters. And they deliver hundreds of millions of dollars to our state every year. But in recent years, we've seen drastic declines of our kelp forests, particularly on the North Coast, with sudden and dramatic impacts to coastal habitats and the communities that depend on them. And the reason for these declines are what scientists are calling the perfect storm of events. So there was this warm water influx that was followed by the loss of a key urchin predator, the sunflower sea star, and then this explosion of the purple urchin population. And it's this last factor, this huge amount of purple urchins that are eating all the kelp, that are really keeping our kelp forests at bay. So purple urchins are just these voracious kelp consumers, and they have this ability to transition these once vibrant systems to what are known as urchin barrens, which basically are like big parking lots on the seafloor that are completely devoid of life. And even after they've eaten through all the kelp and there's nothing left, they can actually persist in the system for decades at a time, like little zombies in starvation mode. And so they are able to prevent any kelp from returning. So given the importance of these systems to our state and to our waters, we can't just sit idly by. We need to act now to protect and restore our kelp forests in the face of climate change and continued threats from human impacts. And because the scale of this issue, this habitat loss issue, is so large, the standard philanthropic playbook that we're used to just isn't going to solve this. The existing toolkit just doesn't scale to meet the size of this problem. And so we need to radically rethink restoration by engaging the private sector and investing in nature. And TNC is really well positioned to tackle this problem. Our Kelp Conservation Initiative is a fairly new body of work that was launched about a year ago in response to these increased threats to our kelp forests. And in that short amount of time, we've really emerged as a leader in developing the solution set to protect and manage and restore our kelp forests here in California. And the way that we've done that and the way that we're going about that is by leveraging these core strengths that we have at TNC: scientific research, technological innovation, the exploration of market-based mechanisms to drive change, and by establishing a diverse set of partners. And so over the last year, we've forged a diverse set of agency and industry and community and academic partners, and we're really working to drive this big vision for kelp restoration forward. And so our kelp strategy is really divided into three main buckets. The first is understanding kelp dynamics by using new technology and introducing new data streams like satellites and drones. The second is resetting the ecosystem to allow nature to recover. These are things like urchin removals or predator introductions. And the last is conducting restoration in a scientifically robust way when more active approaches to restoration or reforestation are needed. And so I wanted to share with you today some of the really great progress that we've made in just a really short amount of time. So to improve the way that we map and monitor kelp forests, we've teamed up with two of the leading researchers in kelp at UCLA and UCSB to develop KelpWatch, which is our online kelp visualization platform. And so as you can see on your screen, the video should kick in, but here we are off the coast of Santa Cruz Island, and what KelpWatch enables the user to do is to zoom in on their area of interest. There you go, off the coast of Santa Barbara there. Zooming into your area of interest and drawing a box around the kelp forest that you have an interest in. And the platform allows you to calculate kelp extent and biomass for any given time in over a 30-year time series. And this data is all derived from the Landsat satellite. And so this vision for this product was really driven by a need from the research community to have a better way to access and analyze these data from Landsat. But what's been really exciting about this product is that as we've gotten this into the hands of researchers, we've identified that not only does it solve a pain point for them, it also solves a pain point for the management community. And we've seen managers' eyes just light up at the prospect of applying this tool in the resource management context. So I love sharing this product because I think it's just a great example of some conservation technology that truly is solving a pain point for multiple customers. And so over the next few years, we are planning on rolling this product out from Baja all the way up to the Bering Sea, changing the way we track kelp dynamics across the entire west coast of North America. And from there, we'll continue to roll out globally, beginning with our friends in Tasmania, Australia. And so as I mentioned earlier, the standard philanthropic toolkit just doesn't scale to this problem. And so we're looking to the private sector to leverage the private sector to advance restoration. And I think especially now in the face of all of this uncertainty with this global pandemic, that we really have an opportunity to help communities shore up their economic resilience through scaled habitat restoration. And so we're exploring market-based solutions to these reset and restore components of our strategy. And we're looking to align incentives between the private sector and conservation to identify opportunities for win-win outcomes. And so if you think back to that perfect storm that I shared with you in the very beginning of the talk, you'll remember that the purple urchin is one of the key drivers of kelp loss. And without first addressing this overabundance of purple urchin, we really can't go about restoring our kelp forest. And so last year, we teamed up with this group, Urchinomics, and Urchinomics is this innovative aquaculture company that has built their business model around urchin ranching. And urchin ranching is basically sending divers out onto the reef to harvest urchin and then bringing them back to shoreside facilities where they fatten them up. That's the ranching part. And in 6 to 8 weeks, they have a commercially viable seafood product that you probably know as uni. And so in this way, by eating sushi, you actually can be doing your part for conservation. And urchin ranching is an important component of this solution set for two reasons. First is that the urchins that are present on these barrens are already starving. They've already eaten through all the kelp, and so they're not a commercially viable seafood product. And secondly, the purple urchin here in California are not the typically targeted species by our fishermen. And so if we want to incentivize harvest, we're going to have to urchin ranch in order to make them a commercially viable product. And in the development of this urchin ranching industry, we're basically incentivizing the seafood industry to do what they do best, which is catch a whole lot of sea creatures. And so in this way, we're creating this win-win-win. We're removing these pesky purple urchins from the seafloor, we're making room for new kelp to grow, and we're creating opportunities for fishermen who've seen their livelihoods vanishing right along with the kelp. And so over the last year, we've demonstrated that we can, in fact, ranch our purple urchin here in California. And so our next steps are really to figure out the strategy behind aligning that urchin ranching and the harvest effort with restoration projects and scaling an urchin ranching industry here in California. So again, thinking back to that perfect storm of drivers of kelp loss, you may recall there was the loss of this sunflower sea star, which is a key purple urchin predator. And this sea star was lost beginning in 2013 with the outbreak of this particularly virulent disease. And so this is problematic because we think that this animal is one of the only, if not the only, predator of purple urchin on the North Coast. And so our team set out to develop a captive breeding program for these animals in order to better understand the impacts of the disease, the resiliency of surviving individuals, and as a means of ultimately safeguarding against their loss and extinction. And before we launched this program, these animals had actually never been spawned or reared in captivity, and I am proud and excited to report that over the last year, we've been able to successfully do so, and the result of that work is now hundreds of little sunflower sea star babies that very well may be the last hope for their kind. Our team is quickly advancing a body of work that's changing the trajectory of kelp forests here in California, and we're constantly thinking about how we can scale that solution set to other areas around the world. Kelp forests across the globe in places like Chile and Australia and Japan are facing declines and threats to their kelp forests from climate change and human impacts just the way we are here in California. And while kelp is in decline in many of these regions across the world and restoration is being done, kelp forest restoration has never been scaled the way that other marine habitat restoration has. The speed and scope of threats to kelp forests underscore the importance of moving quickly in the direction of solutions towards kelp protection and restoration. And in developing a playbook for kelp conservation here in California, we can then go ahead and take those lessons learned and extend them beyond our waters. So today we're engaging the global community, of course, through our KelpWatch platform, which will soon enable regions all over the world to better track their kelp dynamics and better inform management decisions around their resources. And then in November, later this year, we're bringing together the world's leaders in kelp restoration to share out lessons learned, to develop restoration best practices, and to advance the pace of kelp restoration together. This is the determining decade for our oceans, and I feel very strongly that as we enter this next 10 years, our team and our strategy are well positioned to drive forward this big vision for kelp restoration and conservation that starts here in California and extends around the world. All we need is your support. So, in closing, I just wanted to take a little moment to summarize some of the key takeaways from the talk today. First is that California needs to act now to conserve our kelp forests for the hope of kelp forests across the world. And if we get this right in the next 10 years, we just have this incredible opportunity to deliver healthier, more resilient oceans that can absorb more carbon and deliver increased benefits to communities and nature. You can stand up for kelp. You can eat purple urchin, eat lots of it, go ahead. Support sustainable seafood, call a legislator and ask them to protect kelp forests. And lastly, you can have an impact on this irreplaceable habitat. Please lend your support. We are in the very early stages of what may be the most ambitious conservation effort for our oceans ever. And this effort will certainly have lasting impacts on this critical habitat. So thanks so much for joining us today. I'll pass it back to Lindsay.
With that, I will say thank you once again on behalf of the Nature Conservancy for your support and for joining us today.